The galaxy had been in a delicate balance for eons. The Volthrons, a race of intelligent beings, had long held the reins of power, imposing strict codes, guidelines, and laws across the stars. Civilization flourished under their rule, as their ancient wisdom dictated that harmony and order must govern the universe. Other species had learned to adapt, shaping their societies around these stringent principles, accepting their place in the vast cosmic order. Then came the humans. At first, the Volthrons had been curious, but dismissive. They had observed this upstart species from the distant fringes of their empire, and despite humanity's rapid technological advances, they were certain that humans would fall into line like all the others. The first human expeditions to the outer colonies had been met with polite, yet firm, guidance. After all, this was the way of the galaxy: follow the rules or face the consequences. The humans, however, did not. When the humans arrived at the Volthron-controlled space station, they were not greeted with the usual formalities. No one expected them to be different, much less a threat. A group of humans, merely a handful, had boarded a transport shuttle and made their way to the station, with little more than a few hastily written codes for docking procedures. The Volthrons, seeing the documents, had smirked at the humans' lack of precision, assuming they would quickly adjust to the expected customs. As the humans docked and disembarked, the station's automated systems, designed to maintain strict order, welcomed them as it would any other race. The Volthrons had given instructions on where to go, how to behave, and what to avoid. The humans nodded but did not listen. They wandered freely, ignoring every sign, every warning, every protocol. A Volthron officer, Commander Velair, stood in the control room, observing the humans' actions through the station's security monitors. His antennae twitched nervously as he watched them walk past the designated reception area, through the restricted zones, and into the engineering quarters without so much as a glance at the authorized personnel-only signs. Velair had heard rumors, of course, whispers of how humans disregarded authority, but now he saw it firsthand. This was not just a failure to comply with minor rules. This was something more dangerous. His fingers tightened around the edge of the control panel as he issued a command to the station's automated security drones. Within moments, they would confront the humans and escort them back to the docking bay. But something stopped him. He hesitated. In all his years of service, Velair had never encountered a species that behaved like this. Every race, no matter how different, had followed the rules. Even if they resisted, they obeyed eventually. But these humans, they were unpredictable. And unpredictability was a concept foreign to him. It wasn't just an inconvenience, it was a threat. "Commander, should we proceed with a detainment order?" an aide asked, his voice shaking with uncertainty. Velair turned to the aide, his face a mask of conflicted thought.
No.
"We need to observe them more closely. There's something different about them." The humans, blissfully unaware of the station's rising tension, continued their exploration. They moved past Volthron engineers who were engrossed in their work, pausing only to admire the station's advanced technology, which seemed to bewilder and amuse them in equal measure. They made no effort to hide their fascination, chatting loudly amongst themselves. One of them, a young woman with a bright, curious expression, approached a power core. It hummed with energy, and the control panel displayed a series of complex symbols, unfamiliar to any but the station's most experienced engineers. Without a second thought, she reached out, touching the panel. "Don't touch that," one of the engineers yelled, rushing toward her. But the woman simply smiled and pressed a few buttons on the console. The engineer froze in disbelief as the panel blinked into a new configuration. The system responded. It was now operating under a completely different set of parameters. It wasn't just a simple error, it was a complete reprogramming of the core's interface. What did you do?" the engineer stammered. The human woman didn't answer. She simply grinned, as if she had solved a puzzle, before casually walking away, leaving the Volthron engineer staring at the now malfunctioning control panel. Commander Velair's heart raced as he watched this unfolding disaster. The humans were not only ignoring the station's laws, they were dismantling its systems. They were hacking into it with no regard for the consequences. And the strangest part? They didn't even seem to care. A low hum echoed through the control room as the Voltron officer activated the emergency response protocols. A subtle alarm began to blare, and the station's artificial gravity system briefly fluctuated. This wasn't just the rebellious actions of a few tourists, it was a crisis. The Volthrons had underestimated humanity's unwillingness to obey. But the humans didn't flinch. They just laughed. And that laughter sent a chill through the very heart of Voltron civilization. The Voltron security drones began to swarm, gliding through the station's corridors like an unstoppable wave. Their metal exteriors gleamed under the artificial lights, their mechanical limbs clicking with precision as they moved swiftly toward the humans. Velair watched through the security feed, his heart pounding. This was the moment when the humans would face the consequences for their defiance. The drones were programmed to enforce the station's laws without question. They would detain any unauthorized individuals and remove them from restricted areas. It was a simple matter of procedure. The humans would be surrounded, detained, and sent back to their shuttle, their actions recorded for the Voltron High Council to assess. They would learn the cost of disobedience. But when the drones reached the humans, something entirely unexpected happened. Instead of the humans stopping in their tracks, they simply turned around, greeted the approaching drones with waves and cheerful expressions, and continued their exploration. One of the humans, a tall man with short-cropped hair, noticed the drones hovering nearby. He raised an eyebrow and casually reached for the nearest terminal, his fingers flying across the interface in a blur. The station's security systems blinked red for a brief moment. Then, with a subtle hum, the drones froze midair, their mechanical joints locking in place. The humans didn't seem to notice the strange occurrence. They were too engrossed in their discovery of a new hallway lined with unfamiliar technology. Velair's antennae twitched violently. "What happened?" he demanded, leaning toward the aide next to him. "Sir, it appears the humans, they've overridden the security drone's commands," the aide said, voice cracking. "The systems are still reporting them as inactive." Velair couldn't believe it. The Volthrons had designed their security measures to be foolproof. Nobody could bypass them without significant technical expertise. Yet the humans had done it effortlessly, as if they were toying with the system. "Get them back online," Velair growled, his patience wearing thin. He understood now that this wasn't simply a matter of rebellious tourists, it was a deliberate disruption. The humans were actively destabilizing the station's operations. Meanwhile, the humans continued on their path, completely unaware of the chaos they were causing. The tall man who had disabled the drones smirked and slapped a high five with a companion. "This place needs a bit of a tune-up." "Huh," he joked. They moved deeper into the station, pausing only to examine alien artifacts or press random buttons on interactive consoles. The Voltron engineers, helpless against the sudden disarray, scrambled to restore order, but it was clear that their systems were no match for the humans' ability to adapt and manipulate. As the humans wandered through a restricted chamber, they stumbled upon the station's main communication hub. The doors slid open automatically, and the group stepped inside. They began to laugh when they realized it was a command center, the very heart of the Voltron network. At the center was a massive console, its interface shimmering with holographic displays. One of the humans, a woman with bright red hair, was the first to approach. She tapped the surface of the console, and the display flickered in response. The others gathered around, muttering excitedly as the data began to change before their eyes. "This is crazy," one of the men said, marveling at the vastness of the information laid out before them. The woman grinned. "I think we just got access to the entire station's data."
Whoops.
At that moment, Velair's voice crackled over the station's comm system. "Unauthorized personnel, cease your actions immediately. You are in violation of Voltron law. Your activities are considered sabotage and will be punished accordingly." The humans didn't flinch. They simply looked at each other, as if considering the implications of the Voltron command. Then, the red-haired woman spoke. "You know," she said casually, "that sounds like a threat. I'm pretty sure you can't arrest all of us." "Commander," another aide stammered, his eyes wide in panic. "The humans they've taken control of the communications array. They've locked us out of the primary network." Velair's furrowed brow deepened, his thoughts racing. The humans weren't just hacking into systems, they were actively taking over the Voltron infrastructure. Every attempt to regain control resulted in more failure. They were getting closer and closer to the core of the station's operations, and with each step, the Voltrons lost more ground. "We need to act now," Velayer barked. "Deploy the countermeasures. Prepare for the lockdown." But even as he spoke, the station's alarms rang louder. The humans, it seemed, had anticipated the response. They were disabling the countermeasures, overriding the lockdown systems before they could even be initiated. It was as though they were playing a game, each move calculated, yet always one step ahead. "Commander," the aide said, voice shaking, "the systems are failing faster than we can restore them. They've breached the reactor core's security protocols." Velayer's breath caught in his throat. If the humans gained control of the reactor, it would be a disaster on an unimaginable scale. The station could explode, destroying everything in its vicinity. But the most terrifying thing of all wasn't the potential destruction. It was the fact that the humans didn't seem to care. They were moving through the station like it was their playground, dismantling everything in their path with no concern for the rules, the consequences, or even the existence of the Voltron Empire itself. For the first time in history, the Voltrons found themselves facing a species that not only refused to follow the rules, but had the audacity to rewrite them. And they were terrified. The Voltron station was now a hive of chaos. The once imposing walls, lined with intricate alien technology, had become a playground for the humans, who navigated through the corridors with an air of careless amusement. Security systems were down, communication channels were blocked, and every effort to restore order was met with failure. It was as though the humans were not just breaking the rules, they were mocking them. Commander Velayer had retreated to the station's command center, his once pristine uniform now disheveled. The Voltron engineers and soldiers who had gathered there looked like they had seen the impossible. "How did they get this far?" Velayer demanded, his voice strained. They're like a virus," one of the engineers murmured. "Every time we think we've stopped them, they've found another way in. It's like they can adapt faster than we can react." The human woman with the red hair, she was the one who had bypassed the main security systems earlier, was now at the heart of the station's central control hub, her fingers flying over the interface with ease. There was no panic in her actions, no fear. She wasn't even in a hurry. She was having fun. "You know, this is way more interesting than the tourist attractions back home," she said with a laugh, her voice echoing in the hollow chamber. "I can't believe how easy this is. It's like you guys were asking to be hacked." The other humans were scattered throughout the station, dismantling anything they could get their hands on, chatting and laughing as if they were on some sort of vacation. The more Velayer watched, the more he realized that these humans weren't trying to conquer the station. They weren't even acting out of malice. They were playing a game, and to them, the rules didn't apply. "What are they doing?" Velayer asked, voice low. "Why aren't they trying to escape?" They don't need to escape," one of the officers whispered, eyes wide with disbelief. "They're not just trespassing, they're rewriting the station's entire purpose. They've taken control of everything. And I think they like it." The realization hit Velayer like a blow to the chest. These humans weren't afraid of the Voltron Empire or its laws. They didn't care for the consequences of their actions. They weren't trying to take the station for themselves or sabotage its mission. They were simply dismantling the very concept of control. And that terrified him. Meanwhile, the humans were continuing their tour of the station. The red-haired woman, now surrounded by a few of her companions, had found the central power grid, a system that had been locked down tighter than any other. But the humans had no respect for these locks. With a few deft strokes, the woman brought the grid online, and the lights across the station flickered as the core came to life. "This place is way too secure," she joked. "They made it way too complicated for their own good." Her companion, a grinning man with a patch over one eye, chuckled. "Maybe they were just trying to keep us out. Guess it didn't work." As they explored, they left behind a trail of confusion and disarray. Voltron personnel, who had once been proud of their advanced technology, were now frantically trying to contain the situation, only to find themselves locked out of systems they had spent millennia perfecting. Nothing they tried seemed to have any lasting effect. The humans were too quick, too adaptable. The woman approached an area labeled Core Containment and stopped in front of a massive door. Her companions circled her, watching with interest. "All right, team," she said, her voice filled with excitement. "Let's see if we can't make this place just a little bit more interesting." She pressed her palm against a control panel, and within seconds, the heavy door slid open. On the other side was a massive, pulsating core, the heart of the station's energy, its lifeblood. For any other species, this would have been an area of immense importance, carefully guarded and meticulously maintained. For the humans, it was a challenge. "Watch this," she said, grinning. She raised her hand and typed furiously into the air, manipulating holographic interfaces that no one else could even understand. With a flourish, she completed her sequence. The core's energy levels began to fluctuate wildly, causing alarms to blare across the station. "Wait!" one of the Voltron engineers shouted, rushing toward the control room. "You'll overload the entire system." But the woman didn't stop. She glanced at her companions and shrugged. "Don't worry. It'll be fine. We just have to make sure we hit the right buttons." The energy readings on the monitors skyrocketed. The core glowed brighter and brighter, sending shockwaves through the station. The human woman stepped back, her eyes glinting with mischief.
"Whoops.
"Maybe I hit the wrong button," she said, grinning. "But then again, I don't think it really matters, does it?" Back in the command center, Velea was staring at the security feeds in disbelief. The station's core was unstable. It was as though the entire structure was on the brink of collapse, and the humans seemed completely indifferent to it. "They're trying to destroy the station," Velea hissed. "This is madness." The aide next to him shook his head. "No, sir, they're not trying to destroy it. They're just playing around with it. They don't care what happens next. They don't even follow the most basic rules of safety." Velea slammed his fist against the console. "We can't let this continue. We need to regain control now." But it was too late. The station systems had already been compromised beyond repair. The humans had rendered the Voltron's rules, their order, and their laws entirely irrelevant. In the face of such utter disregard, Velea realized something far more profound. These humans were terrifying not because of their power, but because they had no concept of limits. In their world, there were no rules, no boundaries. For the Voltrons, a race that had thrived on order for eons, this was the ultimate weapon. It was not brute force that would undo them, it was the very essence of chaos, embodied in these humans. And as the station trembled under the weight of their rebellion, Velea knew the Voltron Empire was on the brink of something far worse than collapse. It was facing an existential crisis. The humans were rewriting the game, and there were no rules left to follow. The once pristine Voltron station was now a ticking time bomb, and no one knew how much longer it would hold. The humans had turned every system against itself, their playful disregard for rules causing the station to slowly destabilize. Commander Velea had watched helplessly as his people scrambled to restore order, but each new attempt to contain the chaos was met with failure. Worse still, the humans seemed to thrive in the madness, their laughter echoing through the halls as if they had all the time in the galaxy. Inside the heart of the station, the human woman with the red hair stood near the core's fluctuating energy field, observing the chaos she had instigated. Her eyes sparkled with amusement as the lights flickered above her, casting erratic shadows on the walls. She had never expected it to be this easy, yet here she was, in control of an entire Voltron station. "Hey, guys," she called to her companions. "I think we've overstayed our welcome. Time to move on to the next phase." The others, clearly not in a hurry, gathered around her. They all wore expressions of pure curiosity, as if they had just stumbled upon the best discovery of their lives. They had invaded an advanced Voltron station with no resistance, hacked into its core systems, and were now standing in the nerve center of an empire's technological marvel, barely breaking a sweat. It was exhilarating. "Next phase," one of the men asked, grinning. "What's that?" She shrugged casually. "Well, we've had our fun with our tech, So let's just make sure we leave them with something to remember. Make sure they know they've been outplayed. The tall man who had disabled the security drones earlier spoke up. Don't we want to leave the station intact? I mean, it's still a pretty cool setup. The woman laughed, shaking her head. Leave it intact? That's cute. No, we're going to show them something they'll never forget. As she reached for another control panel, the station's alarms blared again, louder this time, signaling the rise of a new threat. The station's core was on the brink of a full-scale meltdown. The Volthrons had tried to stabilize it, but with every passing second, their efforts were undone by the humans' interference. Velair, in the command center, watched as the readouts showed the final stages of the system's collapse. It was a hopeless battle. His people had been outsmarted, outmaneuvered, and most importantly, outclassed in adaptability. Every plan, every countermeasure had failed. "Commander, what should we do?" one of his officers asked, panic evident in his voice. Velair's face had gone pale as he realized the full scope of the disaster. "Prepare the escape pods. We have no other choice now." The aide hesitated, eyes wide. "You mean abandon the station?" "We're losing control of everything," Velair said quietly, his voice grim. "There's no saving this. We need to leave, or we'll be caught in the explosion when the core detonates." As the Volthran officers began to evacuate, Velair stood still, staring at the chaos unfolding on the screens. He couldn't help but wonder, how had the humans done it? How had they brought an entire station to the brink of destruction without even breaking a sweat? It wasn't just the station they had overwhelmed, it was his entire understanding of how the universe worked. The humans were now outside the core chamber, leisurely strolling through the halls as if they were simply taking a walk in the park. Despite the urgency of the situation, there was no sense of panic in them. It was as though the impending meltdown of a station millions of miles away from Earth meant nothing to them. They had done what they came to do, disrupt the established order and expose the flaws of a system that had been unchallenged for eons. The red-haired woman said, glancing over her shoulder at the flickering lights. "I think they're starting to get the message. They thought they had everything under control, but really they were just waiting for us to show up and make things more interesting." Her companion with the patch over his eye chuckled. They really didn't know what hit them. The humans continued their slow pace, weaving in and out of the chaos they had caused. Each corner they turned was a new opportunity to poke fun at the station's advanced systems, reprogramming every terminal, unlocking doors, and disabling more of the station's security. It was like a game to them, a game where the Volthrons were no longer the ones in charge. By now, the station's automated systems had started to trigger emergency shutdown protocols. Artificial gravity flickered, then cut off completely for brief moments, sending objects and people floating weightlessly for a few seconds before gravity returned. The station was in disarray, and despite the Volthrons' best efforts, nothing could stop the impending catastrophe. The humans had turned the station into their playground, and as they approached the station's main docking bay, they knew they had accomplished their mission. The Volthrons, the supposed rulers of this region of the galaxy, were nothing more than pawns in their hands. "We've overstayed our welcome, haven't we?" the red-haired woman remarked as they made their way toward the shuttle bay. "Time to leave before they really lose their heads." As they neared the docking area, the station shook violently. The core's instability was no longer something that could be ignored. Velair, watching from his command center, realized that the time had come. The humans had won. The station, a symbol of Volthran ingenuity and control, was doomed, destroyed not by brute force, but by the human trait of refusing to follow the rules. The escape pods launched, and as Velair watched his people leave the station, he couldn't shake the thought that perhaps this wasn't just the fall of a station. Perhaps it was the beginning of the end for a civilization that had relied too heavily on rules that no longer mattered. As the last of the humans boarded their ship and the station's final alarms rang out, Commander Velair could only watch helplessly as the humans left the station behind, leaving nothing but destruction in their wake. The universe would never be the same. As the Volthran escape pods rocketed away from the crumbling station, the light of the massive core explosion lit up the space behind them. The shock wave of energy surged outward, ripping through the station's remains like a great hand shattering glass. The Volthrons watched from their pods in stunned silence, unable to comprehend the scale of what had just happened. The station, once a symbol of their empire's might, was now nothing more than debris floating in the cold, empty void. Commander Velea was at the helm of one of the escape pods, his face pale and rigid. His people had managed to flee the destruction, but there was no joy in the escape. Only the gnawing realization that everything they had built had been undone by a group of humans who had never once respected the rules. "We've lost everything," Velea muttered, staring out into the darkness. "Our station. Our security. Our pride." Beside him, the aide who had been with him since the beginning of the crisis was equally somber. "We weren't prepared for this."
How could we have been?
No one thought a species like them would ever exist. Velea turned to face the aide, his eyes burning with frustration. It wasn't just about them being different. It was that they didn't care. Not one bit. They didn't care about the rules, about order, about any of it. "They don't play by any of the laws we've established in the galaxy," the aide said quietly. "And that's what makes them dangerous." Back on their ship, the humans were already celebrating. The shuttle, though battered from their brief but chaotic stay on the station, was now safely drifting through space. Their mission was complete, and they had thoroughly enjoyed every moment of it. "Do you think we broke them?" the red-haired woman asked, tossing herself into one of the shuttle's seats with a grin that was almost mischievous. She was wiping some stray grease off her hands, though no one could remember exactly what she had been working on. "Oh, definitely," said the man with a patch over his eye, giving her a wink. "I've never seen a species so strung out. They couldn't even get out of their own way. Those Volthrons, they're used to being in control, and we just came in and had our fun with everything." "Do you think they'll try to hunt us down?" the tall man asked, looking over at the rest of the group, still digesting the enormity of what they had done. "Let them try," the red-haired woman said, leaning back in her seat. "They don't know who they're dealing with. And now they've learned the lesson the hard way. The universe doesn't have rules for us. It's us who decide how it works. If they want to stop us, they'll have to learn the hard way, too." The others laughed, but there was an underlying edge to the words. They weren't simply jesting, they were confident. The humans had faced no serious opposition throughout their mission, and the ease with which they had taken control of the Volthran station made it clear that they were capable of much more than the Volthrans could ever anticipate. It was clear that the Volthrans had underestimated the humans. They had assumed that their station's advanced technology and strict adherence to rules would keep them safe from any interference. But the humans had broken every rule without even thinking twice, and in doing so, had exposed the flaw in the Volthran way of life. Their reliance on order had made them predictable, and their failure to account for the unpredictable nature of the humans had led to their downfall. Back in the Volthran Empire, the news of the station's destruction and the defeat of their finest engineers spread quickly. A meeting was called, and the High Council of Volthran leaders gathered to discuss the unprecedented failure. Velea had returned to his home base, a place far removed from the scene of the disaster. He sat in a dimly lit room, his hands clenched tightly around the armrests of his chair. His mind raced with thoughts of the humans, their audacity, their unpredictability. But there was something else lurking deep within him, a question he couldn't shake. "Are we the ones who are wrong?" Velea muttered to himself. He had spent his entire life believing in the supremacy of Volthran civilization, the righteousness of order and control. But the humans had shown him a terrifying new way of thinking. What if the Volthrans were the ones trapped in a system that no longer worked? At the council meeting, Velea was greeted with a mixture of silence and harsh criticism. His failure had cost the Volthrans more than just a station. It had shaken the very foundation of their empire. The council members were enraged, their voices echoing through the chamber as they demanded answers. But there were no easy answers to give. "You are supposed to protect us, Commander," one of the council members accused, his voice trembling with fury. "You let a group of humans who have no understanding of order destroy everything we've built." Velea's voice was calm, but his words carried weight. "It's not just that they destroyed the station. It's that they didn't need our technology or our rules to do it. They just broke them." There was a long silence as the council members considered this. For the first time, they questioned the very foundation of their civilization. Had they truly been as invincible as they had believed? Or had their rigid adherence to rules and order made them vulnerable to a force that didn't abide by those same principles? As the humans continued their journey through space, the news of the Voltron defeat spread far and wide. They had not just stolen a station or hijacked technology, they had shattered the very concept of control that had governed the galaxy for millennia. And in their wake, they left a question that lingered in the minds of all who heard their story. What happens when a species decides that the rules don't matter? For the Voltrons, the answer was clear. They had to adapt, or they would be swept away. But for the humans, it was a question they had no intention of answering. They had already rewritten the rules. The game had changed, and there was no going back. The Voltron Empire reeled from the loss of their prized station. Across their vast territories, news of the human incursions spread like wildfire. To most species within the Empire's control, the Voltrons had seemed invincible, their authority enforced through a blend of advanced technology, ironclad rules, and unrelenting order. The humans' audacious defiance had shattered that illusion, igniting a spark of hope among the oppressed. In the darkened chambers of a Voltron High Council, the mood was anything but hopeful. The counselors sat in heavy silence, their once proud expressions now tinged with unease. The holographic projection of the destroyed station flickered before them, a grim reminder of their vulnerability. "This cannot stand," boomed Counselor Erin, her tone sharp with indignation. "These humans have humiliated us, and worse, they've inspired unrest among our subjugates. Reports of protests and uprisings have doubled in the last cycle." Another counselor, a wiry figure with a steely gaze, responded with measured words. "This is not merely about the station. The humans operate beyond the bounds of predictability. If we don't act decisively, we risk more than rebellion. We risk the erosion of everything we stand for." In the corner of the chamber, Velayer stood quietly, his presence a reminder of the Voltron failure. Though he was not directly accused, the weight of blame hung over him like a shroud. "Commander Velayer," Erin snapped, her piercing eyes fixing on him. "You've faced these creatures firsthand. What do you propose?" Velayer hesitated. Every fiber of his being wanted to call for vengeance, to rally the Empire's forces and crush the humans. But he knew that approach would fail. The human strength wasn't in their technology or their numbers. It was in their refusal to conform. "They're not like us," Velayer began, his voice steady but grim. "They don't operate within our frameworks. They don't abide by rules, and they don't fear consequences. If we respond with brute force, they'll only find a way to turn it against us. To fight them, we must first understand them. Adapt to their chaos." Erin scoffed. "Adapt to chaos? That's madness. Madness is believing we can beat them at their own game without changing ourselves." Velayer shot back, surprising even himself with the conviction in his tone. "We cannot outmaneuver them if we remain rigid. The first step is learning why they act the way they do, and why their disregard for rules is their greatest weapon." The council fell into murmurs, uncertain whether Velayer's words were wisdom or defeatism. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, whispers of the humans' exploits reached the outer fringes of Voltron territory. In places where the Empire's grip was tightest, those whispers grew into shouts. The story of how a small group of humans had dismantled an entire station without regard for authority inspired resistance movements among species long thought too beaten to fight back. On a mining colony under Voltron control, a group of workers huddled in the dim light of a maintenance tunnel. Among them was Kale, a wiry alien with luminous blue eyes. He spoke with quiet determination, his voice carrying the weight of long-held resentment. "They broke the Voltrons," Kale said, his words stirring murmurs of agreement. "The humans didn't need numbers or weapons or some grand strategy. They just refused to follow the rules. And in doing so, they showed us that the Empire can bleed. They're humans," another worker said skeptically. "They're reckless, unpredictable. We can't do what they did." Kale smiled faintly. "No, we're not like them. But we don't have to be. All we need is to break the right rules. The workers exchanged glances, a flicker of hope passing between them. The seeds of rebellion had been planted, and Kale's words carried the promise of a galaxy where the Volthoran Empire no longer ruled unchallenged. On board the human ship, the crew was oblivious to the chaos they had sparked. They lounged in the common area, recounting their exploits with laughter and pride. The red-haired woman, whose name was revealed to be Jessa, leaned back in her chair, a sly grin on her face. "I still can't believe how easy it was," she said, tossing a small piece of salvaged tech into the air and catching it. "They thought their rules would protect them. Turns out, rules are just suggestions if you don't care about the consequences." "Think they'll come after us?" asked the tall man, named Darek. "Of course they will," Jessa replied with a shrug. "But they'll be too busy trying to figure out what hit them to actually catch us. Besides, by the time they do, we'll be long gone." The man with the eye patch, Brant, chuckled. "And then we'll just break their rules, all over again." The crew laughed, but Jessa's grin faded slightly as she looked out the viewport at the stars. For all their bravado, she couldn't shake the feeling that their actions had set something much larger in motion. In the far reaches of the galaxy, where the Volthoran Empire had yet to tighten its grip, a coalition of species began to form. United by the humans' example, they started to question the Empire's authority and their own acceptance of its rule. And as the humans continued their journey, blissfully unaware of the rebellion they had inspired, the galaxy began to change. The Voltharans faced a new reality, one where their rules no longer held sway. In the silence of his chambers, Velair pondered the path ahead. If the humans represented chaos, then perhaps the only way to survive was to embrace it. But could a civilization built on order and control adapt in time? The humans had rewritten the game, and now everyone else had to play by their rules, or abandon the game entirely. The Volthoran High Council deliberated long into the night cycles, their rigid framework of governance struggling to adapt to the growing dissent spreading across their empire. Commander Velair's words echoed in their minds. Asterisk, to fight them, we must first understand them. Adapt to their chaos, asterisk. The council, though reluctant, approved a risky new strategy. Velair was tasked with assembling an elite task force to track down the humans. Unlike conventional Volthoran teams, this group would operate outside the bounds of the usual rigid protocols. They would be granted unprecedented autonomy to pursue the humans and uncover the secrets behind their anarchic methods. Velair chose his team carefully. Agents known for their unorthodox thinking, cunning, and adaptability. Among them was Talon, a former intelligence operative who had been reprimanded repeatedly for bending the rules. She grinned when Velair briefed her. "So, let me get this straight," Talon said, leaning back in her chair. "You're giving me permission to do the very thing you used to discipline me for?" Velair's expression was grim. "This isn't about breaking rules for fun. It's about survival. The humans have forced us into a corner, and now we have to fight on their terms." Talon smirked. "Sounds like they've already won, Commander." Velair didn't respond. Deep down, he feared she was right. Meanwhile, aboard the human ship, the crew was enjoying their newfound infamy. They had received scattered reports of unrest across the Volthoran territories, and though they hadn't planned for it, the chaos they'd left in their wake was deeply satisfying. Jessa, however, was growing restless. As the leader of the group, she thrived on unpredictability, but even she couldn't ignore the feeling that something was closing in on them. "We've made some powerful enemies," Jessa said during one of their strategy meetings. "The Voltharans won't just roll over. They'll come after us, and they'll adapt." Brant, lounging with his boots on the table, waved her concern away. "Let them try. We've danced circles around them, so far. What's one more chase?" "This isn't just about outmaneuvering them," Jessa replied sharply. "They're desperate now, and desperate people are dangerous. If we're not careful, they might actually catch up." Dark leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "So, what's the plan?" "Run." Jessa shook her head. "We don't run. We make them chase us into a trap. Let's see how far they're willing to go when the tables turn." The Volthoran task force wasn't far behind. Using advanced tracking systems, they followed the humans' trail across several abandoned outposts. Talon's unconventional tactics had already paid off, as she anticipated the humans' moves by thinking as unpredictably as they did. "They're toying with us," Talon said, studying the erratic patterns in the humans' movements. "Every time we get close, they change direction. They're not running, they're leading us somewhere." Velair stood beside her, arms crossed. "Do you think it's a trap?" Talon nodded. "It's always a trap with them. The question is whether we're smart enough to see it coming." Velair glanced at the holographic map displaying the humans' recent course. They had entered a region of space known as the Shattered Belt, a dense field of asteroid clusters and derelict ships, notorious for its hazards and lack of navigational reliability. "They're drawing us into the belt," Velair said. "Why would they risk it? Even they can't survive in there for long." Talon's eyes glinted with intrigue. "They're counting on us thinking exactly that. But I say we follow. If we want to understand them, we have to be willing to take the same risks they do." Velair hesitated, then gave the order. The task force plunged into the Shattered Belt, their ships weaving through the treacherous terrain as they closed the distance to the humans. Inside the belt, the humans were already preparing their trap. Jessa stood at the ship's console, coordinating the placement of decoys and time disruptions to the Voltron systems. "This is risky," Dark said, watching her work. "If even one of those asteroids clips us, we're toast." Jessa flashed him a grin. "That's the fun part. If they're smart enough to survive this, they deserve to catch us. But something tells me they'll fall apart before they even get close." As the Voltron ships entered the belt, their sensors began to malfunction. The humans had seeded the area with signal jammers and falsified energy signatures, creating a labyrinth of false leads. Talon quickly realized the trap was more complex than she'd anticipated. "They're using the belt to scramble our systems," she reported to Velair. "We're chasing ghosts out here." Velair's jaw tightened. "Pull back and regroup. We're not losing ships over their tricks." But it was already too late. A well-timed jamming pulse sent one of the Voltron ships careening into an asteroid, its hull crumpling on impact. The explosion rippled through the comms, a stark reminder of the humans' ingenuity. "They're forcing us to adapt," Velair muttered, his frustration mounting. "We can't fight them head-on." Talon smirked. "Looks like they're teaching us their rules, one move at a time." The humans watched from a safe distance as the Voltrons began to retreat, their trap having claimed only a single ship. "Not bad," Brant said, clearly impressed. "Think they'll come back for round 2? "They will," Jessa said, her expression serious. "They're learning faster than I expected. Next time it won't be so easy." "Good," Dark replied, a grin spreading across his face. "We wouldn't want it to get boring." As the humans prepared to leave the belt, Jessa couldn't shake a feeling of unease. The Volthrons were evolving, and for the first time, she wasn't entirely sure if they could stay ahead. Out in the void, the Voltron task force regrouped, their losses a bitter reminder of the humans' prowess. But amidst the wreckage, Velair found himself inspired. The humans' refusal to abide by the rules had forced him to rethink everything he knew. "They've given us a gift," Velair said quietly, staring out at the belt. "They've shown us what we're capable of, even in chaos." Talon chuckled. "Guess we owe them a thank you card." Velair's eyes narrowed.
"Not yet.
"First, we catch them. Then we show them how chaos can be turned against them." The hunt was far from over. The Voltron Empire was reeling, but the task force under Velair's command had sharpened their resolve. Their losses in the Shattered Belt had only hardened their determination. In the wake of their retreat, Velair spent countless hours in strategy meetings, studying the humans' patterns, analyzing their every move. Despite the human skill at avoiding capture, Velair had come to a realization. They weren't just breaking the rules, they were defining the battlefield in their image. They were forcing the Volthrons to play by new rules, ones without order or boundaries. But now Velair had a plan. A final gambit. "We will turn the humans' own tactics against them," Velair announced to his team. His voice was quieter, more assured than it had ever been. The task force, now fully adapted to operating without the old constraints, listened intently. Are you sure about this? Talon asked, leaning forward. We're talking about drawing them into a trap of our own. One they won't see coming. And if it fails... Velair's gaze hardened. If it fails, we will die knowing we tried. But this time, we won't chase them. This time, we'll force them to come to us. The humans, oblivious to the storm that was quietly gathering around them, continued their travels. Jess's crew had become accustomed to being on the move, always one step ahead, always outwitting their enemies. They'd outsmarted the Volthrons at every turn, but even Jessa couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. We're being watched, Jessa said one day, her voice calm but tinged with uncertainty. They're getting closer. I can feel it, Brant scoffed. You've been saying that for weeks. The Volthrons are playing catch-up, and we're just making them look stupid. I know, Jessa replied. But it's different this time. I can sense it. They're not making mistakes anymore. They're adapting. Dark glanced over his shoulder at her. So, what's the play? We outrun them until we hit another dead zone. Jessa shook her head.
No.
This time we're going to make them come to us. We'll set a trap, but it'll be us doing the hunting. The crew exchanged wary glances. They were used to running, not confronting. But Jessa's confidence was undeniable. They all knew that if they wanted to continue this dance, they would have to learn new moves. Velair's trap was set. The task force had lured the humans into a sector of space, known for its erratic gravitational fields, dangerous enough to be an uninviting place for most, but precisely the kind of place the humans would think they could outmaneuver the Volthrons. The humans took the bait, but they were unprepared for the full scale of what was waiting. As they entered the field, their ships began to experience severe malfunctions. Sensors flickered, artificial gravity fluctuated, and even their navigational systems began to fail. We're caught in a grav field, Dark shouted from his station, panic creeping into his voice. Jess's hands flew over the controls, but she couldn't make sense of the rapid fluctuations. This wasn't supposed to happen, she muttered. This isn't a trap they set. They're trying to break us. Then we break them first, Brant said, his voice tinged with excitement. They want chaos? We'll show them chaos. Jessa, her mind racing, realized what was happening. The Volthrons had learned. They weren't relying on overwhelming numbers or brute force. They had orchestrated a scenario that exploited the humans' dependence on their technology. The Volthrons had set the perfect environment, one where even the humans' cunning could not outthink the natural chaos around them. Hold tight, Jessa said, taking a deep breath. We need to disrupt their system before they do the same to us. Velair's eyes gleamed with satisfaction as he watched the humans struggle. Their ship, now trapped in the gravitational turmoil, was no longer moving with the fluidity it once had. The humans were being forced into a defensive position, unable to escape or outwit their surroundings. Talon, who had been observing the humans' reactions, turned to Velair with a look of admiration. They're good. They're very good. But they're losing control. Velair nodded, his expression hardening. This is the moment. They have nowhere left to run. But just as the Volthrons closed in, a flicker of hesitation passed through Velair. The humans had proven time and time again that they didn't play by any rules. Had his trap underestimated them? Were they, in fact, still a step ahead? Before he could act, the humans did something no one expected. They used the chaos of the grav field as their weapon. Jessa, a sudden flash of brilliance crossing her mind, took a daring risk. She ordered a course correction that pushed their ship's remaining power systems to their limits. The ship, already destabilized by the gravitational forces, angled sharply toward the Volthron formation. The sudden move confused the Volthron ships, pulling them into a new wave of gravitational turbulence. The humans had used the very disorder the Volthrons had set up against them, turning it into a weapon of their own making. Velair's eyes widened. They've adapted. They're turning our own trap into a victory. For the first time, Velair felt fear. Not the fear of being beaten in battle, but the fear of being outmaneuvered by a force he couldn't control. As the Volthron ships veered off course, their systems overloaded by the human sudden shift, Velair realized that the game had changed again. This can't be, Velair said, his voice barely above a whisper. They've taken our rules and made them their own. Talon stood beside him, a knowing smile on her face. They've shown us the truth, Commander. Chaos is their greatest strength. And now, they've forced us to live by their rules. Back aboard the human ship, Jessa allowed herself a small, satisfied grin as the Voltran forces began to scatter. The chase had taken a turn, and for once, it was the humans in control. We did it, Dark said, breathless. No, Jessa replied, her eyes narrowing. We haven't done anything yet, but we've sent a message. And what's that? Brant asked. Jessa's voice was steady. That we don't play by anyone's rules. And we never will. As the humans disappeared into the vastness of space, leaving the Voltran forces in their wake, one thing became undeniable. The galaxy had changed forever. No longer would order and control be the unchallenged foundations of power. The humans had proven that the true power was in defiance, in refusing to follow the rules. And for the first time in the history of the galaxy, chaos had a new name.